Sam R. Tinged, mejor conocido por su proyecto artístico Glassio, se ha vuelto uno de los últimos proyectos más interesantes que ha tenido la oportunidad de escuchar bajo la combinación de géneros de synth-pop, indie y principalmente en la electrónica. El día de hoy les mostraré una entrevista que le hice a este artista, hablando un poco de su historia, su proceso, algunas anécdotas. Espero les guste. En esta primera parte, Sam menciona sobre sus primeros recuerdos que lo llevaron a aspirar y decidir enfocarse en la música.
Yeah, my earliest, I guess my earliest memory of that would be, I was very young. I was maybe 3 years old, 4 years old, and my mother, my grandmother, and my mother both liked the musician Glenn Campbell, the country musician. So I heard a lot of his music in the house, and my mom owned a tape of his concert from 1977 at the Royal Festival Hall in London, and he's playing, I think, with the London Philharmonic Orchestra behind him, and it's a very magnetic, glorious video. Like it's
Wow.
the type of thing. If you squint at it, it almost looks like you're looking at a diamond. Like it's very luminescent and very vibrant, and so as a kid, you know, like you just arrived into the planet, you just arrived on the face of the earth, and this is what you're looking at. It's a pretty powerful feeling. And so yeah,
Yes.
when I heard a lot of his music, like there are songs like the Wichita Lineman and By the Time I Get to Phoenix and Rhinestone Cowboy, those were the 3 songs that I just kept singing nonstop as a kid, and I would perform them like I would copy his mannerisms and his performance from that show, so that it really became an obsession, you know, and I wanted to learn guitar. So that, I think, was the first like entry point into being obsessed with music and wanting to make music.
También Sam nos habló sobre sus influencias musicales, empezando en su escritura musical con la ayuda de grandes artistas, especialmente el gran Paul Simon.
Yeah, I mean, Paul Simon's music was a big inspiration to me. I didn't start wanting to actually try to write songs until I became fully introduced to Paul Simon, and I was maybe 12 or 13. And I spent, you know, I grew up in the Middle East in the United Arab Emirates at a time when the United Arab Emirates was not fully developed into what it is today. You know, it was quite a quaint experience growing up there. It was quite nice, actually. There wasn't much happening. You didn't have many construction developments. It was right before everything started to explode over there.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we had a couple of places where you could get CDs, you know, and there weren't many other places. And this was right before the cusp of the internet. So I remember the one Virgin store was selling Paul Simon records, and I devoured that, you know. The album Graceland, especially Graceland, and then the album after it, Rhythm of the Saints, and the album before Graceland, Hearts and Bones, because those 3 records were like 80s and early 90s Paul Simon were huge. I think his lyrics were very, especially on Rhythm of the Saints, that album, the lyrics were very oblique. They were very vague and ambiguous, but painted pictures. Like if you followed the lyrics, it's almost like you're staring at a painting, you know. And it's very specific. I liked lyrics about specific things, you know, like specific moments in time. Like when he starts his songs off with lyrics like, I was having this discussion in a taxi heading downtown, or, you know, the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. These are very specific situations that you're thrown into as a listener. And it's that first line that, and as he explains it in interviews, you know, it's this V shape for a song where you start off in a place that can go anywhere. And it's and it's all about how do you find that one first line that situates you in a place that's very specific, and you can picture it in your head, and it's the beginning to a story. And I think that was a huge inspiration for me, you know, and it's I've always tried to achieve that, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was his lyrics from that era were huge for me.
Were huge, yeah. Glassio es un proyecto que tomó forma al mando de Sam, y un compañero de universidad, nombrado como Charles. Pero su vida en Nueva York y conocer el rumbo de su música fue un momento complicado para él.
Yeah, I mean, I moved here when I was 18, you know, and that was close to 12 years ago. And I was pretty limited in terms of what I was aware of musically. At that point, I had just grown up listening to these maybe 6 or 7 songwriters that I was very fluent in, and I could tell you everything about everything they had ever done. I've always had obsessive phases with certain musical figures. And until I came to New York, I mean, when I moved here, I went to music school, first of all, with lots of people that had grown up trying to write songs, and I felt like I had met different versions of me in class, and everyone came from a different background, you know. My professors were producers and I discovered a lot of music through just learning about the albums some of my professors produced, you know. And that was one avenue. I joined bands that were pretty different and diverse, and my first few bands in college were kind of more new wavy and came from a kind of post-punk place. I was in a band who's the songwriter in the group loved the Strokes, and he loved New Order and, you know, Smiths, and that was a huge, he would sit us down, you know, in his room and like kind of play us records like we were kind of at school. And at the time, it felt a little bit like we were a part of his cult. But I surrendered. I surrendered to the aspect of being a member of his cult, because if I hadn't, I would have never discovered Scott Walker. You know, his dad was a popular musician in the 80s, and, you know, he grew up around a lot of great music. So there were people like that in my life that introduced me to so many genres, and coming out in New York, you know, going out to parties and disco parties, and learning about scenes that come like Fool's Gold, or, you know, DFA, and like a lot of the house music, the world here, like Masters at Work, you know, Let's Play House, and you know, Long Island Electric Sound, all of these. There were just so many great events, you know, and I fell in love with dance music, and pretty much didn't realize that there was a type of dance music that existed that didn't have to always scream in your face, but welcomed you in, kind of like a mysterious next door neighbor who was once an astronaut, you know, like he was once an astronaut that went to the moon, but he doesn't display that out loud very much. He's subdued about his previous history at NASA. So that was kind of like what the dance music was like for me. It was like, we welcome you with open arms, but we're not going to scream in your face that you need to dance. And you don't need to be here with friends. You can be here by yourself, and it can be completely socially acceptable for you to be here alone. And that was what did it for me. I think in 2014, I really started to get into synthesizers and dance music around that time.
Sam contempla de un gran amor por Nueva York. Comentamos mucho acerca de las eras que rebasaron en la ciudad y las bandas que dejaron su huella para ser influyentes para otras generaciones.
It feels like a lineage, you know, because if you go back in time, like, I guess, like, I feel like New York has had golden musical eras along the way, from the Tin Pan Alley era up until, you know, then you had the folk movement in the early 60s in Greenwich Village, and then you had like disco, like some of the first disco clubs like the Loft and the Gallery. But then in the early 80s, you had bands like Liquid Liquid and the Talking Heads that paved the way. They almost, I mean, LCD Sound System takes so much of their sound from those bands.
Exactly.
And it's like every 10 years or so, there's this continuation of this state of mind here that's it's almost like there's so much happening. It's impossible to not write music here that feels like you're commentating on lots of different people's lives at once. And I think that's what the Talking Heads feel like to me. That's what LCD feels like to me. And I guess some of my stuff tries to do the same lyrically. I try to write music that feels good for the subway. I think I'm just inspired by the movement of the city, and I unintentionally think about venues like the subway, or biking across the bridge, or biking through the city. You know, I just love it here so much.
Otra parte que destaca del trabajo de Sam es cuando trae su creatividad en los videos musicales. Pocos artistas manejan esta relación entre la música y los videos para darle una mejor identidad a su trabajo. Pero Sam busca relucir en esta parte, que nos platicó a cómo llegó con la decisión de crear sus propios videos musicales.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a couple of reasons why I started doing that. One of them is, frankly speaking, well, I'll start with the other one first. I mean, the first form of expression of expressing myself creatively in life was trying to make movies when I was 11, 10 years old. Before I started writing songs, I was very set on being maybe a film director, and I made films, you know, terrible movies. Like, you know, I'm glad that my family moved so much, because it's a good thing that those tapes are gone. It's a good thing that they miss. But you know, I had like 3 friends that were constantly my Robert De Niro's, you know, and
the actors.
Yeah, so we were but yeah, so I came from that original place, and you know, when the pandemic happened, I was about to release my first record, and had the pandemic not happened, you know, I would have been in a place where I would maybe collaborate with other people, and I wouldn't be taking it upon myself. But I used the opportunity to try to, because I was limited, I thought maybe there are things that I can do here that will work with the amount of gear I have at my disposal, which is exactly what I ended up doing, because I needed to do visuals for it. So I ended up just doing that, and you know, it's not high, it's so low budget, but I think frankly speaking, budgets and limitations and deadlines are like the 3 best things ever. And that's what ended up happening. And I think that the other reason why I like to think of visuals while I work on the music, and I'm a lot of the times while I'm working on a new song, I'll have a music video in mind for it as I'm coming up with the track and working in the studio here. So it also, I can conserve some money, you know, because I have to, working with other people, you know, I have to pay massive fees for their work, you know. So this is a way for me to conserve money into the project. I'm an independent artist. I work sometimes with labels here and there, but I'm mostly independent. So it keeps funds in that I can use for marketing instead, which, you know, that being said, I love the idea of collaborating, and I love collaborating with other people, and if the funds are there and if the time and ideas are right, I'm all for it.
Anteriormente, Glassio era consolidado como un proyecto hecho por otros colaboradores, pero Sam determinó en seguir con Glassio independientemente, aunque ya tenía deseos desde antes en enfocarse para hacer su propia música.
Yeah, I mean, when I started writing songs, I wasn't in any bands. I was very shy. I was pretty shy, but as a teenager, but I wouldn't show that. I would be pretty loud about being shy. I don't know if that makes any sense. As I say that, it actually doesn't make sense to me as I say that. But I wasn't very good at friends. You know, I wasn't good at making. I was a bit awkward, and because of that, you know, I didn't really jam well with other musicians, and I went to you know, so I learned, my relationship with coming up with music has always been a solo thing, and that changed in college. You know, I started meeting musicians, and you know, in my college that I started writing with, Charles, who started the project with me, mostly my main collaborator in college, and we were in a number of bands together, and but I've always lived with my studio, you know, like this is my setup here at home, and that has given me a lot of freedom to just like not go to bed for the night, or, you know, work on things on the weekend, and I still feel most comfortable making things for myself alone. I love collaborating with other people on their music. Like if someone, and like I love producing other people's songs. And that's, I think, that's where I think I'm best when it comes to collaboration. But when it's a Glassio track, and I'm, you know, and a lot of the times people will reach out that I had never met before on the internet to try to work on something. Admittedly, it's tough. It's challenging for me to be comfortable, you know, writing with someone I have just met. That's why I don't think I'm suited for the Lost Lake for LA and the writing scene out there. It's a tool that I'm trying to work on, but my favorite ideas that I like the most have been by myself, you know. I don't mean to say this in any sense. I don't mean this to come off in any sense like, oh, I'm self-sufficient, I don't need anyone else, because that's absolutely not the case. It's just a matter of what felt comfortable to me in my adolescence and sort of my background in how I do things. And yeah, I think so. I spend I love my alone time, and you know, I'm social like twice a week. when I know
Me too.
when I know I have to plan, you know, I get down and I say a prayer before going out to hang with people. I'm like, you can do this for a couple of hours, and, you know, but you know, yeah, it's just I like to zone out, and that sometimes isn't easy when you're working with people in the same room. So I hope that answers your question.
Sam lanzó su primera canción bajo el nombre de Glassio en el 2015 y actualmente se ha enfocado en experimentar con nuevas cosas, incluyendo algunas colaboraciones que ya tenía preparadas para este año, pero como ha visto su música crecer desde que empezó.
I'm probably the worst person to ask, because I think if I overthink it, there's a very high chance I'll be sent away for a while. But you know, by my family, they'll but no, I think I've made decisions along the way that have felt true to what I was musically inspired by at the time. Like when I started the project out with Charles as a duo, we were both very into electronic. Like I wouldn't say, no, we were like into a lot of electronica and like French touch kind of music, French electronic music and disco. And I think we had a more angular approach to some production choices that felt definitely more straight up synth dance, you know. And since then, like obviously it's been years since then, but my recent decisions in the studio have felt more dream pop oriented. And how do I bring guitars into this universe? You know, how do I not just coat everything in synthesizers? Like these were decisions limitations I started giving myself, because how do I break the rules here in such a way that I'm not just repeating myself? I think repeating myself is something that you know, it can happen to anyone. Like, and it's okay to do it. I think it's okay to repeat your formula in different ways. And actually, I think it's fun when one thing you do is almost an allusion and a reference to something from the past. But a lot of the new music that I'm starting to release is all I'm bringing in new voices into the mix. The songs are pretty much mine, but I'm working productions around the textures and tones of other people's sound and other people's voices. So that's been a new path, I suppose. And I think I'd like to think that it might be less pop, some of the stuff. Like Try My Charm is a very pop song. It's a very poppy song in my opinion. The production on it, I produced that with two other people, with Charles and a friend of ours from school, Mike Adubato, Charles Pinnell and Mike Adubato. The three of us worked on that. So, and we were working on it from the perspective of, we want to make a huge pop song, you know, and now that translates in we wanted to make the drum sound big and have these big moments, and it works for the song. But I think with a lot of the newer music, I'm bringing in a lot of psychedelic influences. I've always loved psychedelic music growing up, and it changes song to song. Right now, I'm in a position where I'm only really interested in releasing single songs at a time, and I'll see where it takes me. I'm canoeing without a paddle, and I'm very excited by that, because when that happens, you know, if it turns into a body of work, it'll happen very naturally. So that's the position I'm in.
Para terminar, Glassio platicó un poco acerca de una de las canciones que le mencioné que yo escuché por primera vez de él, llamado Nobody's State for the DJ, pero también de lo que significa la música para él, como un ámbito esencial de su vida y lo que lo ha llevado a hacer ahora.
Yeah, I can try to remember the last time I didn't feel like music was the best way for me to connect with the world, but it's felt that way since I started writing music. I felt once I started writing songs, the first songs were really bad, but even so, I thought, okay, this is the only way I feel like being completely honest, which is a little toxic, and a little immature. But you're 15, so but you have to grow up and you have to be a giving human being to people in your life in other ways. But I thought, okay, now I just have I'm just gonna I'm gonna romanticize just doing it this way. But yeah, I think I've fallen in love and out of when you make this a career, you meet a lot of people, and you also meet a lot of nasty people, and it's I think along the way you have shows where people are there to support you. You see who's really your friend. You see if people are only interested in you because you start seeming successful, and and then all these people start coming out like life, but yeah, that song started as a bit of a joke about like just a really depressed DJ playing in a room to nobody and wondering, what the hell am I doing with my life? Why am I doing this? All my friends are doctors and lawyers, and here I am trapped in a room playing to nobody. And then it feels so nice to remind yourself, because I've played rooms like that to nobody before, especially when I first started DJing, and in the midst of that you remind yourself, like, who cares? I love music. This is all I want to do with my life. This is all I can do. I don't know how to do anything else, and why should I not be grateful to be alive and just having the opportunity to hear this song I love in this space, and not caring anymore about what people think. So I've always cared too much about what people think. So yeah. Maybe that was, I don't know, it's probably a little bit of a commentary and a bit autobiographical, but I also know a lot of people and musicians that feel the same way when they play to nobody.
Yeah, it's kind of hard. Espero les haya gustado esta entrevista. Dejaré una playlist de Spotify en la descripción si quieren conocer más del trabajo de Glassio y se acerquen a su música. Nos vemos, bye.